And it's a trend that keeps on happening over and over and over again. I was just in a court in a different county, and I see this guy, and he's got the same problem. He's never had any significant criminal history in his entire life, and suddenly he's got what should have been a small misdemeanor, really a nothing crime that pretty much any attorney could have possibly either pled down or made it just not a big deal. And now he's staring down the barrel of a felony because a police officer is charging him with an R&O. And it's something in the last few months that we've just had a complete influx of phone calls about and people walking into our office. You know, basically from what I was able to tell, so he gets pulled over for some sort of a moving violation, right? No big deal. And I don't know what the entire story is, but maybe the cop thought that he smelled of alcohol or I don't know, something, whatever. But the next thing you know, the cop's asking him questions. The guy gets mouthy. The cop asks for him to come out of the vehicle. And he refuses, and now you got a cop pulling on his arm, cuffing him, and he gets charged with a felony. It's an R&O. This guy's never been a felon his entire life. Now, this particular case isn't even mine, but I could tell you in the last 6 months, I got 3 people walking into my office with the exact same problem. And one of which I think was just asking, like, hey, what is the problem? Like, are you sure that I have an issue? And if people don't know what their obligations really are when they get stopped by the police, they risk running afoul of being charged with this felony. I think this is the easiest felony to get. It's the only felony that I know of where simply asking a question without any ill intent whatsoever can literally get you charged and potentially convicted of a felony that could put you in prison for up to 2 years. And do I think it's ridiculous? Absolutely. Absolutely, I think it's ridiculous. But this is the world that we live in. These are the rules that unfortunately apply. And we need to know this stuff, and we need to know what we can do about it if we kind of make a mistake and find ourselves on the wrong side of this equation. Hi, folks. I'm criminal defense attorney Keith Stickley with the Stickley Law Firm here in downtown Hillsdale, Michigan. Today, I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain one of the easiest felonies it is to be convicted of in the state of Michigan. And the really crazy part about this felony is a lot of times you can get charged and potentially even convicted of this felony simply for asking a police officer a question. It's important to keep in mind that this video is not a substitute for formal legal advice. We don't have any sort of attorney-client relationship here. But if you or somebody you care about ends up getting charged with resisting and obstructing a police officer, it's imperative that you get competent legal counsel and you do it quickly. If you're in any of the areas that I service, you are more than welcome to give us a call here at the Stickley Law Firm, and we will do our absolute best to protect your rights and get you the best possible outcome. So we're actually a little bit more casual than normal here today, but this is such an important thing that I feel like I need to address and make some content about, because I cannot tell you how many times in the past 6 months I've either observed somebody being charged with this, or I've had people walk into my office with this kind of problem. And I do think that the R&O charge that you sometimes hear it referred to as, or resisting and obstructing, is one of those things that police and prosecutors are starting to use way more liberally as a sort of a gotcha. And not knowing this information could really, really hurt you if you have some sort of contact with law enforcement. So let's dive deep into what we're really talking about here. In Michigan, we have this law that attorneys sort of colloquially call R&O, okay, resisting and obstructing. And it's one of the easiest ways to catch your first felony. And this happens all the time at traffic stops, domestic violence calls, even noise complaints. Now, these are things that might have been tickets or simple misdemeanors, and they suddenly become elevated to a felony status because of how broad this law is, and because police sometimes use it as a trap. Shocker, I know, right? Police might try to trap you in some sort of a violation. Yeah, it's true. It happens all the time. And certain officers in certain jurisdictions are very well known for employing this tactic. So let's jump into what this law actually is, what the statute says, and what we need to know about this particular situation. The actual law is codified in Michigan Compiled Laws 750.81, usually Section D. And that law says that it's a felony to assault, batter, wound, resist, obstruct, oppose, or endanger an officer performing their duties. So the maximum penalty for this specific charge here is 2 years. You might hear it referred to as a 2-year felony. That's the absolute maximum. Now, it is important to know that when we do talk about the potential maximum penalties in Michigan, and I think we've addressed this in some of our other and I think we've addressed this in some of our other content, that doesn't mean that if you get convicted or for some reason if you have to plead to this 2-year felony, to this 2-year R&O, that you're going to prison for 2 years. Michigan has sentencing guidelines which take into account all these various factors of the crime that you're being accused or convicted of and sentenced on, and your past, whatever past criminal history, and a bunch of other factors to give you a sentencing range. Usually that sentencing range is in a certain period of months. And judges use that as a guideline when assessing a sentence. If you have specific questions about this, check out our other content, specifically the anatomy of a felony case. In that video, I break down the exact steps that occur in a felony case from arrest all the way through either a trial and conviction or a trial and acquittal. It's also important to bring up that Michigan has an attempt statute or an attempt rule. And what that does is that allows you to be only convicted of attempting, which cuts the potential penalty in half. So if you were charged with attempt R&O or convicted or somehow plea bargain to attempt R&O, the maximum sentence is 1 year in jail. But keep in mind, while the penalty for an attempt R&O is greatly reduced, you could still be looking up to a year in jail. And that's not unheard of in the state of Michigan. But why is it so easy to be charged with this crime? Well, the truth of the matter is this law is incredibly broad. Resisting doesn't have to mean punching or kicking. It can mean pulling away when the cuffs come out. It can mean simply stiffening up your arms if a police officer is trying to put you in cuffs or restrain you somehow. It can even mean what some courts call going limp. Here's the kicker. The officer's word often carries the day in the police report. If they write in the police report, the subject resisted, that's enough for a prosecutor to file a felony charge. And worse, we have to take it a step further. Believe it or not, if you are simply asked to step out of a vehicle and you ask a couple of questions before you do so, I don't know, maybe, can I speak with your supervisor? Or, I don't understand, can you double check this? Or, I think you're mistaken, I don't have a warrant. Clearly that's not resisting, clearly that's not assaulting, but they consider that obstructing, somehow interfering with a lawful command, disobeying a lawful command. And believe it or not, they can charge you with a felony for that. So now we have a traffic stop or a misdemeanor domestic dispute that simply gets elevated to felony status. And that's why I call this a sucker trap. Some officers know exactly how to push your buttons. They do it on purpose, and then they turn around and they use your reaction against you. And quite frankly, the hard truth of the matter is the courts aren't on your side. Michigan courts have routinely said things like going limp is enough to count as resisting. That means the bar is crazy low for prosecutors. Imagine that. Simply passively resisting could literally equal a felony charge. The only real area where the law gives us some room is if the officer is performing their duties somehow illegally. In other words, the officer has to be performing their duties lawfully for somebody to obstruct. If they are not being lawful in their activities, then the entire case can collapse. But think about that for a minute. How broad is that? That's kind of crazy, right? If a police officer can simply say, well, I had probable cause to think, basically a hunch that something might have been going wrong, and then they're going to try and detain somebody for questioning or something, and they say, hey, do this, that, or the other, they're probably technically acting lawfully. And if you question any of that, they basically have the right to go, you're obstructing what I'm trying to do here. I'm charging you with a felony. So what are we going to really do about this? And how am I, as a criminal defense attorney, supposed to defend you, protect your rights, and mitigate any damages that may have occurred? Well, when I defend these cases, I look at certain things. First and foremost, obviously, I look at the lawfulness of the officer's actions. Now, there was recently a Supreme Court case, I think just last year. We're filming this in 2025. This was last year in 2024, People v. Prude. In that case, convictions were actually thrown out because the officers involved weren't lawfully performing their duties. If the stop was bad, if there's a traffic stop, and it truly is a bad stop, or the arrest was somehow illegal, then the felony can't stand. And that's kind of common sense, right? But you would think that common sense would be a lot more common. Unfortunately, it's not. I also look at what counts as resisting. Now, are we talking about some sort of passive behavior versus active resistance? And that is really the real legal battleground, right? Did my client actually resist, or were they just scared and slow to comply? Now, the problem is the statute itself doesn't really give us a whole lot of leeway that way. And because you're being charged with a felony, you might have the chance to have you have the right to have a preliminary exam, especially in the areas that I represent clients in. Having one of these charges thrown out because a judge is going to actually make the judgment call whether they were actually resisting or if they were just scared or slow to comply is not really something you want to jump into. That's going to be your defense in many situations. You really need to just gamble and take it to a jury trial. I also look at the knowledge of the individual who's being charged. Did they know that the officer who was charging them with an R&O was an actual police officer? In certain rare situations, we've had situations where like a plainclothes officer tries to identify or something, but the person might not have really known that it was an actual police officer trying to give them lawful commands. And so we've had to get involved in that sometimes. Obviously, we look at evidence as well. Body cam footage. Many departments, in fact, I'd say most departments, state police and local departments have body cam footage now. Is there dash cam footage? Are there any third-party witnesses? The more video, the more eyewitnesses, generally the better in these situations. And the really rare thing that we have to look at, but it's something that we do have to take seriously, is there any sort of defenses of necessity or maybe self-defense? Now, this is a very, very, very narrow window. Sometimes self-defense to an R&O can be a defense if you can somehow show that an extreme amount of excessive force is being used. That being said, I'm going to use that last point to transition into this point, and that is you cannot win this battle, the battle between police officers and yourself, the battle between complying lawfully and not, and being charged with an R&O on the street. This is a battle that needs to be fought by attorneys in a courtroom, and I'm going to tell you why. The police officer has all the power, but in a courtroom, you have rights. We can file motions to suppress, we can demand body cam, we can subpoena dispatch logs, we can cross-examine the officer, and that's where the playing field changes if you retain competent counsel to defend against your R&O charge. So let's give you some plain English advice if you're in this situation. Number one, if you're in a heated situation with a police officer, stay as calm as you can and keep your voice down. Number two, do comply with basic instructions. Hands visible, right? If they tell you to get out of the vehicle, get out of the vehicle. Number three, if it's safe or you have some sort of device doing it, go ahead and record the encounter. But do not record the encounter on something like your cell phone if you have to have your hands being active, all right? That's only if you can somehow passively record something. Number four, always ask politely, am I being detained? Let's say that again. Number four, ask politely, am I being detained? And after you say that, shut your mouth. What happens to you after that question is asked? Set the stage for everything to follow. Don't argue or pull away. Do not stiffen up or go limp. Do not fight an officer in the street, okay? I'm not gonna lie. It might suck in the moment, okay? You might be dealing with a cop who is acting like an a-hole. You only keep your legal options alive if you stay calm. And let's talk about what happens if a cop really is out of line. What do you do? Because yeah, it's gonna suck. It is. Quite frankly, if an officer uses excessive force, if he makes an illegal arrest, or he violates your constitutional rights, that could potentially open the door to a federal lawsuit under what's often referred to as a 1983 action. It's basically a law, 42 U.S.C. 1983. And that is where you can actually get compensated. That means money damages. They have to pay an expensive bill for your rights being violated. And I can tell you, we've been part of several 1983 actions in the last couple of years, and people who have had their rights violated have gotten huge payouts, massive payouts. But here's the thing, if you're fighting a cop, that lawsuit usually dies. If you try to file one of these lawsuits and you have a felony conviction for resisting, your civil case is basically done. So I can't emphasize it enough. Do not throw away your chance at justice just by escalating because you're heated in that moment and you're really pissed off. I get it. I'd probably be pissed off too if I was in that situation. But the side of the road or out in public is not where we do our fighting when we're accused of something that we don't think is right. We do that fighting in the courtroom. So just a quick recap here, okay? If you have an encounter with the police that is not going well, number one, stay calm. Number two, comply. Number three, if there's any chance that you can do it passively without interfering with the If there's any chance you can do it passively without interfering with what's going on, record it, okay? And then we fight it in the courtroom, not the street. Call your lawyer immediately. So bottom line, if you or somebody you care about has been charged with resisting and obstructing here in Michigan, do not panic, but don't go it alone either. These charges can be beaten, or if they can't be beaten, oftentimes they can be greatly reduced with a little bit of common sense and understanding. We've done it with motions, we've done it with body cam footage, we've done it with cross exams. And I can tell you, when things have gone really sideways, we've done it with 1983 actions, and we've made them pay for their mistakes and pay dearly. So if you have these kind of issues going on, call my office and let's make sure a mistake out on the street doesn't turn into a lifelong felony. If you found this content to be helpful, do me a big favor. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. We try to make content regularly about legal issues and situations that people here in Michigan may find themselves in. You can find all of our contact info here on our channel or our social medias. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and we'll talk to you real soon.